Today we're learning about a nonprofit that diverts 2.5 million meals from landfills every year and has served over 10 million meals to families in need. Episode 266 features Justin Levy, Executive Director of Conscious Alliance.
So the light bulb for me was, all right, brands are throwing this away. We're out there soliciting donations of 10,000 units at a time, which we're being told is coming out of a marketing budget, and they don't have the marketing money for it. Well, what if we can shift the accounting system with major food brands and make these donations come out of cost of goods, just as dumping it into the landfill would be? So we started picking up food from brands' warehouses and moving it directly into the hands of kids and families who need it. And we grew from 300,000 meals to 700,000 meals to 1.1 million to now over 2 million meals a year.
I'm Andy Wong, financial advisor at Runnymede Capital Management and host of the Inspired Money podcast, where we share positive perspectives on money so we can make a bigger impact in our communities and in the world. This episode is brought to you by Yadi.com, my favorite online source for authentic Jamaican products. You can get natural soaps, jerk seasoning, and Afimi snacks. That's breadfruit, sweet potato, and green plantain chips. My splurge is ordering Blue Mountain coffee. We love it at both my house and at the office. It's smooth, sweet, and it smells delicious. Go to Yadi.com, that's YAAHDY.com, and use discount code MONEY to get 10% off your entire order. Get great Jamaican products delivered to your door, and feel good that your purchase supports local Jamaican vendors. A small portion also supports the Inspired Money podcast. Today we're talking with Justin Levy. With cerebral palsy and severe dyslexia, Justin is living proof that limitations and obstacles should never stop you from pursuing your passion and making a greater impact. He's executive director at Conscious Alliance, and taking on national hunger relief is no small feat. Did you know that hunger affects 1 in 8 kids in the United States? You're about to hear about a movement of artists, musicians, food makers, and music lovers on a mission to end hunger in underserved communities nationwide. In this episode, you'll learn about the power of experiential learning outside of the classroom, Justin's sometimes circuitous and unplanned path of helping kids, and make sure to tune into the end to hear how Conscious Alliance has scaled its impact in a big way. Now let's get inspired with Justin Levy. Justin, welcome to Inspired Money. I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. Really looking forward to our conversation today.
Let's jump right in. What's your earliest childhood memory of money?
I think my first real tangible memory of money was my parents owned a small retail jewelry store in the town that I grew up in, and they would have sidewalk days where all the businesses would come out onto the sidewalk, right, and set up tables and kind of create like a fair, like a farmer's market setup at all the local stores. And I remember my parents taking me downtown to Chicago, and they gave me money to purchase my own jewelry, to set up my own table at the sidewalk days, and gave me the opportunity to run that table. And that's kind of my earliest tangible memory of money.
That's cool. So they set you up with a little business.
A little business for the weekend in August every year, you know.
What did you learn from that experience? Like, did you learn how to interact with people and to suggest products?
I mean, that's where my head first went, is like I learned a skill, or continued to develop a skill, of being able to connect with people, like welcoming people, saying hi, like making sure a customer wasn't just standing there for a long time, but that there was a personal interaction, right? The other piece that I really learned was choice of like going through these big markets in Chicago and getting to pick out the bracelets and necklaces and charms that I wanted to sell, right? And the third that I really picked up is simple percentages. So like at a really young age, and then through middle school, high school, like working in other retail stores, like this is 20% off. How much is it? And like I remember teaching adults like simple tricks of like how to figure out what 20 or 25% off would be for what turned out later to be outdoor jackets, right? Like I was in outdoor retail and climbing and stuff like that. But that kind of entrepreneurial spirit is kind of what my parents gave me there around.
That's really cool. And it
money.
has practical application when you can take 10% off, 20% off, and calculate a tip quickly when you need to.
Yeah.
So, Justin, you're doing great work at Conscious Alliance to awaken compassion and end hunger nationally. But I want to start with your personal story because you had a pretty challenging start in life. And as I picture you on this sidewalk sale, selling jewelry and trinkets, I don't know if you were in a wheelchair, but I'm kind of curious, like as a kid, did you have a dream of what your future might look like?
No, I didn't have a dream of what my future looked like at all. I think I just kind of learned to take things as they come, and I don't mean that in a passive way, but just sort of, really just taking it kind of moment by moment, and I'll say aggressively pushing forward. Some of the things you alluded to, I was born very early, and my brain bled before I was born, and so they found out pretty quickly that I had cerebral palsy, and it was a challenge. I think it was also a gift, and my perspective can change day by day as like things get hard sometimes. But I think that it was a gift because, the doctors told my parents, "Hey, we have no idea what Justin's going to accomplish," and so for me, I would say I had no barriers. There was no expectation of me, and I mean that in a positive way. I wasn't in a box of like, hey, you have to do this and you have to do that. It was like, we're going to find out if Justin's going to be able to walk, and so everything sort of just happened as it did, right? Not without a lot of effort, struggle, support, all the things that come with it, but just sort of the expectation of like, yeah, we'll see what this kid will do, right? And I also probably pretty quickly was diagnosed with pretty severe dyslexia. I didn't learn how to read till I was 21, and that doesn't mean that I wasn't reading like a flashcard here or there, but like if I scan a room and there's text on the wall or text, if there's newspapers or magazines, like my brain and eyes don't automatically kind of connect and start reading the headlines, right? Like if I look down and there's a magazine and I want to read the headline, I have to like focus and read it, where what I think from other conversations I've had with people is they can sort of scan a room and be like, hey, here's all the things that this room says, or did you see that headline on the magazine on the table in the waiting room? I'm like, yeah, no, like I didn't bother to hone in and read it. Right. So it created its own challenges for me too. But yeah, the first book I ever read, the first book I ever completed, I was 21 years old.
Wow. Man, I imagine that it was difficult going through many surgeries when you were young and having to relearn how to walk, not being able to read well until 21, that must have been a lot of pressure from like external pressure. People look at you like you can't learn or you're not capable. And that must have been pretty brutal as a kid. Like, how did other kids treat you?
Yeah. Going back to the sidewalk days, like I wore leg braces from the time I could remember, and I'll say like over the years they kept getting shorter until I didn't wear them anymore. But I went from 5 days a week at physical therapy to 4 to 3 to 2 to 1. But this was over, the first decade plus of my life. So a lot of time in the car. How did kids treat me? Children are beautiful. I think we have a lot to learn from kids, and it's still it's a big part of why I'm in the work that I'm in today with Conscious Alliance, and a sort of belief system that I built around in my own head of, let's not overcomplicate things. Let's make sure we can always explain what we do and why we do it to a 2 or 4 year old, right? Like, I think I think we often, as adults, can overcomplicate things, but the kids in my life were sweet and beautiful and great friends, because at a young age, grade school, I think kids just meet people where they're at, right? There's this heart connection. There's like, I think it's a book. I've never read it, but like everything you need to know, you learned in kindergarten, maybe, right? Like, I worked in early Head Start when I was in college because I see the way kids connect, and I think that it's actually our job as adults to remember that and go back to that. So, kids treated me great. I grew up with them from the time I was in preschool through 5th grade. I think when things started to get tougher on that side was, through middle school. I went through some major surgeries that kept me out of school for a month at a time. And as you alluded to, learning how to walk again and again. And I just kept getting further and further behind in school. Math is cumulative. Like, all of a sudden, I'm like, when did they start adding letters to this? Like, and all the classes. And so I would roll my wheelchair at that time. I was in a wheelchair, and I would roll it into my guidance counselor's office. And before I even said anything, he'd say, "That sounds important. Close the door." And, I'd close the door, and he'd say, "I had a meeting I was supposed to go to, but I'd rather talk to you," and that small action on his part, changed the course of my life in a really big way. I'll just say that I talked to him yesterday. So, we met when I was about 11 years old, and we still work together today. So,
Talk a little bit more about the relationship that developed with this guidance counselor, because I've heard you talk about angels showing up in your life.
yeah. Another really special thing that my parents did for me was, one, bring me in to really big life decisions that affected me with guidance and support. But I remember meeting with my doctors as young as 3 years old. I can tell you what the doctor was wearing, the color scrubs he was wearing when I flew to California to have spine surgery. Like, I can tell you what the sky looked like. I remember it all, and I was brought into those conversations to be an active participant. And that was really special. And then the sort of spiritual piece, that I don't even know was intentional, but we often talked about guardian angels, as you mentioned, and what that meant to me was not just the metaphysical, It was actually people that can show up in your life to support you along the way. And to me, it meant my doctors, my surgeons, my guidance counselor, some teachers, right? Some friends along the way that like really showed up to support me. And that's a thread that has carried through to my adult life, through experience. But other things that I learned from that is how to develop a team. Like, how do I bring people in? And at a young age, it was to support me as I was having trouble walking, or I literally needed to go up to somebody in class and be like, hey, can you read this to me? Like, can we do a buddy system? I mean, I think that something that I've realized in my adult life, and when I say I read a book at 21, I want to be really clear that like reading is still very difficult to me. I use technology to digitally read contracts at 400 words per minute to me. I use my iPhone and reading program to read most emails to me at 400 words per minute. So my auditory skill is kind of incredible. People are like, what the hell is that robot? What did that robot just say to you? And I was like, well, what they're asking, you know?
I apologize for speaking so slowly to you.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Like, let's keep going. So, I think I learned at a young age, for me to, develop teams of people, to support me, and how that's translated in my life now is a thread, that still goes back to my guidance counselor. When I was 15 years old, he asked me if I wanted to bring at-risk youth from Chicago to Crow Creek Reservation in South Dakota. And I had so much trust in him that, of course, I said yes. What I didn't realize is that I was actually one of those at-risk kids. I just never knew, and I still don't even know what that means. I don't know what I was at risk of. I think it was at risk of not graduating, but I'm not really sure. It's just another label that, like, add it to the list, you know. Um, but it truly changed my life, and I've taken that forward in my business practice to say, um, not that the coin has completely flipped, because I still, as we all do, need support in our life, and we need friends, family, colleagues, people we know, people we don't know, to show up for us from time to time, right? Pay attention to those little moments, but it has fully informed how I operate business, and how I operate our business for good, to be, how can we show up for kids and families who don't have access to healthy food, and make a difference through Conscious Alliance. And that's something we haven't even touched, but Conscious Alliance becoming a national hunger relief organization, providing millions of meals to kids and families in need across the United States. But that guardian angel piece of like, how do we just show up in a way of using our skills to make things a little bit easier for people?
That's a beautiful thing. Before we get into Conscious Alliance, what did you learn and see working with those at-risk youth in Crow Creek Reservation?
So two things. The kids, the students that I went with were all at risk from outside Chicago, right?
But it's like a totally different kind of at risk, right? I mean, it is and it isn't.
Yeah. So the one class that I was ever good at in high school was photography. It clicked with me. I loved the idea of photographing people and places, and bringing my camera on adventures. And so I brought my camera to Crow Creek, and the guidance counselor, my guidance counselor, his connection was the guidance counselor on Crow Creek Reservation. So all of a sudden it was roughly 15-year-olds having conversations with 15-year-olds, right? So 15-year-olds from Chicago area going to Crow Creek, having conversations with the kids from the school there. And there was so much overlap. It was sports and movies and friends and school dances and school and clothing. And I say clothing as in style and expression, right? And then there was a piece that I felt was different, and it was that the kids on Crow Creek talked about suicide a lot. How suicide had an effect on their childhood, on their family units.
Was that sense of hopelessness eye-opening to you in what you saw in the way your daily life was in Chicago?
I can't say that I remember a feeling of hopelessness. It was an experience of a very different reality at that time for me, right? Like it wasn't hopelessness from the kids. It was, this is just the truth, right? Like this is my lived experience. And on the second trip, the next year, we went to a powwow, brought my camera, and I remember taking pictures, and our sort of rule within the group was like, if you take pictures, get the family's address so you can send the photos once they're developed. This is like, remember, like way before cell phone photos, let alone iPhone photos, right? So it's everything's printed at that time. So it's like, if you capture a great photo, like send it, right? Like that's, and so we got back, to my high school. I developed a bunch of the photos, and my guidance counselor said, hey, we come into the office. I want to see them. And at that time, he let me know that one of the kiddos that I had photographed and spent a little time with at a powwow the week before, he was 11 years old, and he stabbed himself the day after we left and committed suicide. And I didn't know at that moment the profound effect that experience had on me and would continue to have on me, and has on me today. I mean, it's still, I mean, there's not, realistically, there's not a month that goes by without me thinking about that. It plays into what I'm up to today, and I didn't know what that was going to look like, but it was this moment for me, without knowing what it looked like, to say, okay, how can I create positive change in the world? And how can I work to just make it a little bit brighter for not just like thousands of people, right? Like we'll get into the growth of Conscious Alliance, but like really just on an individual level, like how can I show up? And it's almost like, how can I now be a guardian angel, not for everybody, but for somebody? And that can like keep shifting, right? But it sort of gave me that realization of like, oh wait, it's not just my guidance counselor that can do this for me, or my physical therapist who has the skill who can do it for me. Like what skills, what heart, what passion, what what do I have that I can give of myself to um, make somebody else's day a little bit brighter?
So you've been at Conscious Alliance for nearly 20 years. Do you think you found Conscious Alliance or did it find you? How did that how did that play out? Because you've been there a long time and you've really worked up from like the ground up.
Yeah. I'm going to say both. Like I believe that we're put in places, situations, for a reason. And I say all of this and I brought it up a few times and I want to be clear. I don't mean passively, right? Like we're put in situations and then we need to take action to, create the results that we desire, right? And when those things line up, um, the people, the places, the passion, the heart, and the authentic reasoning and all of that, when those line up, like magic can happen. Um, I dropped out of high school when I was a junior. And I did that so that I could go on a national outdoor leadership school program to Baja and go sea kayaking for 2 weeks or so. But the reason I dropped out is because I found out that I wouldn't have to make up my homework if I if I dropped out versus took a leave of absence. So I dropped out for 2 weeks and went to Baja. And I'll tell you, something else clicked for me there where I learned a lot of the things that I never learned in science class. A lot of things that I couldn't absorb from books, which I think it's still the case. I mean, for me, it's still the case, but I think my guess is that schools are still book heavy, or many of them. And it's kind of that's sort of the norm. But I all of a sudden was like, oh man, I am smart. Like I just needed to get out on the water and I could learn about clouds that I didn't understand, from reading from a book, or I didn't understand weather patterns, or I didn't understand team dynamic from reading a team building book. Like, just like, let's get out and do it. So, that was a really nice break for me in my junior year. Just that sort of pause and experience something new. And that awakened me to a whole different style of learning. Similarly to going to Crow Creek, like learning by doing, right? Like learning by serving, learning by being in a different community. Came back senior year, had 2 photo classes that year, which was amazing. I spent most of my time in the darkroom, but I graduated early, not because I was the smartest kid in the room, but because I needed to get the hell out of there. And I flew to Colorado to see the band The String Cheese Incident at the Fillmore Auditorium and walked up on 2 brothers collecting food outside of a concert and trading that food for concert posters. So I went to the store close by and dropped off food and started talking to them and realized that these 2 brothers were supporting Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota, which is about 4 hours away from Crow Creek, where I had gone. Whoa, this is magic, right? Like being of the age of just being so open to meet people. And I'm like, wait a minute. Like I've had these life-changing experiences. I love live music. It's why I'm here. They're trading food for art. And that was sort of the beginning. And, and then again, I'll go back to the effort piece. So I met them. We had a great conversation outside the show, but like, they're interacting with all the fans doing their thing. Couple things I didn't know. That Conscious Alliance had pretty much just received their 501c3 within the last year. these two brothers had just graduated college, right? So we were relatively close to the same age, you know, and it looked like they were this big thing with one of my favorite bands, but like it was as grassroots as it gets. So I went home and saw their schedule of food drives they were going to do around the country, and I remember my friends helping me write an email, and I almost wish I still had it today. I have no idea, but wrote an email to the executive director and just said, you know, like kind of told them my story, like, hey, this is how I found you. This is my experience on Crow Creek. I'd love to get involved, but like had to dictate that email and then have it edited by friends. And like I had to bring in the team of of people just to help me get this email done. Sent it.
And I think you did not get a response right away.
I did not get a response. I absolutely did not get a response. I can't remember. I feel like I sent a follow-up. Maybe not. Didn't get a response. And one night I remember sitting, it was dark out. It was late at night. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to call their office in Boulder, Colorado. I'm going to leave a voicemail and they'll call me back, right? Like, I don't want to write anymore. And I'm like, oh, they're on Arapahoe Avenue. They must have a nice office. I called. It went straight to the executive director and founder's cell phone. And he was in a video store, which is also a nice throwback. Was in a video store in Hartford, Connecticut, visiting
paying his
family.
fines.
Yeah, exactly. Paying all his late fees. And we wound up chatting for like an hour or two. Late at night, I was like, one, I wasn't expecting anyone to pick up the phone. I don't know what time it was, but you know, it was at least an hour later there. Like we wound up having a conversation, and you know, I remember him asking me like, well, you and your friends want to come volunteer in Lawrence, Kansas. Well, meanwhile, like I had a driver's license, but I was a terrible driver. I no longer have a driver's license. Driving around my hometown was one thing. I'd spent 18 years there. I know how to get to the grocery store and to my high school and back, you know, but, you spin me around in a parking lot and I get lost. Welcome to my dyslexic brain. So, like, hey, do you want to help out in Lawrence, Kansas? Well, all right, well, now I got to get my friends on board. I got to get a car. I got to get a driver. And we went out, and I wound up driving back with their head of operations, their third employee ever. We wound up after spending the weekend together, it was, you know, I'll say an adult and then all these children right out of high school who wanted to volunteer, you know. It was like, he's like, well, I'm driving back to Colorado alone. And I was like, I'll go with you. And, you know, that gave us 5 hours to chat. And that was sort of the beginning of the end, of my involvement of Conscious Alliance, like where it really started for me.
For context, for those who are not aware of the work that Conscious Alliance is doing, what did that experience look like for you and your friends? What were you doing on the ground?
Yeah.
As an organization, and yeah, what was that experience like?
So Conscious Alliance started 20 years ago with a really simple idea to put philanthropic efforts in the middle of someone's good time. And we did that by hosting food drives at a concert where we would encourage fans to bring non-perishable food items or make a suggested monetary donation in exchange for a limited edition poster. And I'll say that the first food drive at the Fillmore Auditorium with the string cheese incident brought in 4,000 pounds of food. And that next food drive brought in 8,000 pounds of food. Our posters were not limited edition. It was created by a very well-known artist now named Michael Everett. Conscious Alliance didn't exist at the time. I think our first poster said Conscious Crusaders on it, and the poster was printed at Kinko's. But it worked. So there's 4,000 pounds of food. There's 8,000 pounds of food. And these two brothers loaded it up in a U-Haul and drove it to Pine Ridge Reservation without a contact. They had a P.O. box on the back of a book that they had read by an elder on the reservation. And they pulled up to a gas station on Pine Ridge. And for context, Pine Ridge is the same size as the state of Connecticut. 40,000 Oglala Lakota live there. And there's only one grocery store. One grocery store with the landmass the same size as Connecticut. So they pull up to a gas station and ask if anyone knows the Hand family. They get pointed to a home and how to get there. And they drove up. And the conversation went like this as they sat around a red kitchen table that I now have sat at many, many, many times in my life. If you want to help our people, you'll help feed our people. And that's where Conscious Alliance was built. So the band, the String Cheese Incident, went back to their management, said, we want this to happen at every show. Their management had the forward thinking to say, let's not just make this thing that doesn't even exist yet into just being our nonprofit. Let's introduce them to other folks in the music industry. So that was 2002 and 2003. I met the two brothers in 2004. And what my experience was like was driving across the country to a major music festival called Wakarusa in its first year getting going, and running a booth where fans could bring food or a monetary donation in exchange for the Wakarusa Music Festival poster. Getting to interact with all these music fans and be a part of truly their philanthropic awakening. Like, I know this is true because I was one of those folks where, yeah, I had done nonprofit work. I'm sure I had to do it in school a little bit, right? But this was that first sort of experience where the philanthropic effort fully matched my value and vibe, honestly. Like, this was in my community, right? Like, people bringing food. And then we drove to Colorado and we did it again at the Fox Theater with the band STS9, and then at the Mishawaka Amphitheater with STS9. And then it just continued. Me and my friends spent the summer on the road collecting food across the country. And, you know, I was looking at only two colleges. I was looking at Prescott College in Arizona because they had this kind of experiential, take one class at a time learning opportunity. And they had photography and sea kayaking classes in Baja, where I had just been my junior year. I'm like, this is it. I'm going to go live on a kayak.
You're a genius.
This is going to make sense, right? This is everything. I get to design all my own stuff. And then a friend was like, well, wait, do you know about Asheville, North Carolina? And I'm like, North Carolina doesn't exist in my brain. Like, I'm going out west. I'm going to Arizona or Colorado. They're like, no, you should check out Asheville. And I'm like, all I know about North Carolina is that Michael Jordan went to school in North Carolina, you know? And so I'm like, all right. So I drove to Asheville with my parents, and I found this amazingly small school nestled in the valley of Asheville, and with the Blue Ridge Parkway behind it and these beautiful old mountains. And Orrin Wilson is an 1,100 acre farm school for, at the time I was there, 800 students. And in addition to taking classes with only around 20 folks in each class, you also had to work on campus, whether it was the library, the farm, the garden, and administrative office, and you had to do 100 hours of community service. It's like a hippie oasis for me. And I was like, so I met with their admissions counselor while I was there. And I remember it clearly. The lady said, I've never done this, but I want to read you a letter that your guidance counselor wrote on your behalf. And it was a huge reason why I got into the school. Like, I was the risk. I was the at-risk student. They're like, his GPA is not great. He can't read. Do we have the support? I mean, I truly couldn't still have a hard time. And I remember them saying, hey, you don't have a math credit that you need to get into this school. We think you should take this math class. And me and my negotiation skills. Meanwhile, I'm not in high school anymore. I've graduated early. Like, this is during second semester, but I'd already graduated. I couldn't take the class in school. And they're like, well, we really think you should take this class and then we'll be able to get back to you. And here comes me, where like, I've never wanted to be told no my whole life. Like, hey, you can't walk, you can't run, you can't do these things. I was always like, are you sure? I'm going to prove it to you. So I go to them and I said, look, I'm not taking this math class unless you can tell me that if I take this math class and I pass this math class, that you will let me into the school. And so unofficially, I'm driving. I'm on my way back to somewhere when I got home, and I got a call, and they're like, all right, unofficially, if you take this math class and pass it, we'll let you in to Warren Wilson College. Great, thank you. My family hired a tutor, and I did online. It wasn't even online. It wasn't online at the time. It was mail-in packets of this course for probably remote learners, right? I think I took the test like 3 times and I couldn't pass it. And I didn't think it was fair that was the barrier for me not to get into college. And I have told the college this since, but I paid a friend $200 to fill out these packets for me, probably with his left hand, and gave him a backpacker guitar, a little guitar that you can take backpacking with you. And he filled them out for me. I passed the class. I got the acceptance letter to the college. Meanwhile, I go on the road with Conscious Alliance, and I'm at a festival, and I'm like, what the hell am I doing going to college in a few months? Like, I can't read. I found my thing. I found my people. Like, I don't need to go to college. I should just do this. And a new friend I had met on the road, his name's Keith. He lived in Prescott, Arizona, the other place I was looking at going to school. And I remember him turning to me and saying, Asheville's really cool. I think you're going to like it. Go there. And if you don't like it, you can always move to Prescott. I was like, all right, I'm going to give it a try. And what's funny about that is Keith and I still work together. He manages some of the really big acts that we still work with today. He'll never take credit for that moment. But again, to me, it's like this guardian angel moment of like a conversation that needed to happen. And it wasn't all smooth sailing from there. I went to Warren Wilson, and I remember being in my dorm room in tears, bawling. like, again, what am I doing? Like, I'm cutting the spine off of books so that I can scan in every single page so that I can have a robot read it to me. I'm buying books. I'm cutting them up. I'm scanning them in. I mean, that took hours and hours just to get to the assignment part. Like, just to read the chapters for the evening, day after day after day. And I, convinced my advisor and some other folks to allow me to design my own major. They let a small group of students. It's a program that they offer, but not to many. And I got them to agree to, me designing my own major around service learning, connecting service with academics, which I think I got a degree in service promoting health and happiness is what I called it. And I sat in the cafeteria and did a lot of my own courses and spent a lot of time like developing toy drives and food drives and going on the road with bands during Hurricane Katrina and doing the Conscious Alliance thing. And Conscious Alliance is really what helped get me through college in a big, big way.
Did these efforts give you special access to the bands that you were a big fan, that you were such a big fan of?
Absolutely. Like, I mean, I was 18 years old and got my first all access laminate with the band STS-9. And I think probably because I always put the work first, it's probably why I still have laminates today. Right? Like that I didn't lose that opportunity, that respect, right? Like I really look at it as the musicians are here to do a job, the crew's here to do a job. Conscious Alliance is here to do a job and be a part of the fan experience and the band give back experience. And if we all treat it as such, it's amazing what we can accomplish together. But yeah, it felt pretty cool to realize that I was on the road with my favorite bands who now are friends and family to me and the organization almost 20 years later.
That's really cool. In those early days, could you ever have imagined becoming the executive director?
No. It was never part of the plan. It's like, I think you asked earlier, like, was it part of the plan? Was it, like, how did I see this developing? It's like, I think the tenacity, drive, compassion that I learned at a young age and was developed and continues to develop within me is what drives me forward. I mean, I had no intention on leading this organization. I came in as a volunteer, an intern, a regional coordinator, moved out the day after graduation and got my first paycheck, but had been involved in for 4 years, one of the brothers stepped away to go back to school, change his career. The other brother, needed a change of pace and wanted to get into international disaster relief at the time. And at some point, I was the only option. Like, honestly.
Justin's still here.
Yeah, I'm still here. I remember getting a phone call and a board member asked, like, can you take this thing on? And I very naively said yes. And I remember getting asked many, many years later during an interview, like, if you could do it all over, would you say yes again? It's like, absolutely not. They're like, what made you say yes? And It was that I was naive enough to think that I could do it, which is a beautiful thing, right? Like that unknowing, lack of fear, like opportunity ahead, drive is what got me to say yes. And, there's a lot of other things that, put me in that position, but I think there's a difference between being put in that position and still being here, 12, 13 years after the fact. Like, there's a big difference there too.
So talk a little bit about how you've scaled impact in that 12 or 13 years.
Yeah. So, food drives, art that feeds food drives still being the backbone of our awareness, how we interact with what I call our fan base, right? Our supporters, the folks that engage with our organization. Yeah, our fans. Like, we have grown the kinds of bands we work with through Art That Feeds Food Drives. We've grown the visual artists that we work with. We went from printing offset digital prints to now limited edition screen prints that are really sought after. That's one way.
Yeah, drop some names. I think like Jack Johnson is among
Yeah.
the musicians. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, we just did last year we did Jack Johnson's full US tour with a virtual food drive, which was amazing, right? Like, we were able to interact with Jack virtually and his fans virtually, allowing them to take action in every city that he went, and providing over 100,000 meals to communities across the country. Jack Johnson, the Lumineers, the String Cheese Incident, Dead and Company, right? Phil Lesh and Friends, Alanis Morissette. I mean, the list goes on, right? So Art That Feeds Food Drives, really being the backbone, for us. And then in 2008, we met Justin Gold, who had just launched a really small peanut butter company in Boulder, Colorado called Justin's. And, hopefully you've heard of it by now and had some of their chocolate peanut butter cups. But Justin got going. He had 3 employees, and they were sitting around a picnic table trying to decide what nonprofit they were going to support as they grew. And they looked at all of them. They looked at Hunger and Feeding America. They looked at the Humane Society. They looked at the Boulder Shelter for the Homeless. They looked at, so many different causes. And a dear friend of mine who passed now, Lance Gentry, was on the team. He was one of the first 3 or 4 at Justin's, and said, does anyone know about Conscious Alliance and the work they're doing on Pine Ridge? And Justin selected us. They had no product to donate, no money to donate, but they had time. And they made a commitment to us that as they grew, we would grow with them. They would donate time, and then they would donate product, and then they would donate money, and then they would donate a mix of it. And it's true. We've been working with them for over 15 years, and it's incredible what we've accomplished today. But that same year, Whole Foods bought the grocery store Wild Oats, and chose us as the national charity to receive $1 million worth of private label food. And it wasn't an overnight success. I think, one of our board members a year ago wrapped it in a bow for me. He said, Conscious Alliance is like the band that everybody knows and loves, who's been around for 20 years and just got their first #1 hit. And to me, it was just like, yeah, like, we're not there. It's not like we have more to do, right? But I think the analogy coming from music and being such a music fan, it's like, this isn't this overnight. There's no overnight success story. You can look at any business and, how we built this. It's like, how did this become an overnight success? It's like, nothing is an overnight success. Many things get built over decades, in basements, in offices that have one desk in them, right? Like all this stuff. And so, we grew our natural food connections one by one by one, just as we did with our bands and artists. And we realized that brands have an opportunity to work with us because a lot of food, roughly 30 to 50% of food, gets thrown away in this country. And we realized we could use all our touring and logistics experience to support brands by picking up food that can't be sold to grocery stores.
When did that shift happen from like food drive, people bringing non-perishable canned foods, to like stopping food wastage to feed the hungry and the food insecure?
So in 2015, we went into Natural Products Expo West, which is the largest natural food show in the country. It's in Anaheim. We went in with Justin's Plum Organics and Suja Juice. And the first day of the show, we announced that we were launching the first all natural and organic backpack program for kids. A backpack program is where at school you get food in your backpack and you bring it home to fill the gaps of nighttime and weekend hunger for kiddos. And we launched that on Pine Ridge Reservation with one school. We left that show. We started with 3 brands. We left that show with 10 brands. So that was a first big step for us or the next step. Maybe it's the second step in natural food for us. A few years later, I was at a conference put on by New Hope, the same folks in Austin, Texas. And I watched a presentation by them on food waste and use by, best by, and sell by dates. I'm a terrible cook. And I learned a lot.
Yeah, inform us, because this always seems to be a conspiracy, or at least it's a discussion in my house. My kids pull out the milk and they're like, "This is spoiled." And I take a whiff and I say, "This is fine."
Right.
So I drink it.
So, right. So, they say that you have to have a use by, best by, or sell by date on it. And you and your brand get to pick which one you use for your product. That's it. And what that means is that the product at that date still has the quality where it will look the best, taste the best, smell the best, have the best texture for the person that paid full price for it, right? And so I don't want to pick on any brand, but you can expect the best quality of this granola bar, this almond milk, this peanut butter, whatever it is, right? At this date. And it's brand vanity, meaning that if you bought it at full price, they want you to have the best experience with their product. The regulatory around it is that the consumer should use their sight, smell, and touch to decide whether the product is still good. So what that means, and the light bulb that went off for me, was, well, wait a minute. So grocery stores won't buy this product, which means that brands are throwing it away. But that bag of pasta is still good. I mean, I don't know. I don't even I have pasta in my house. It's been there for a long time, and I guarantee it's still good, right? So again, using some judgment, but the standard with non-perishables, and again, it's just a standard, is grocery stores won't buy it within 90 days of its shelf life, which means at the very least, it still has 90 days left on it. And at max, it might still be good for another 3, 6, 12 months plus. So the light bulb for me was, all right, brands are throwing this away. We're out there soliciting donations of 10,000 units at a time, which we're being told is coming out of a marketing budget, and they don't have the marketing money for it. Well, what if we can shift the accounting system with major food brands and make these donations come out of cost of goods, just as dumping it into the landfill would be? So we started picking up food from brands, warehouses, and moving it directly into the hands of kids and families who need it. And we grew from 300,000 meals to 700,000 meals to 1.1 million to now over 2 million meals a year that we're picking up from brands, warehouses, using all of our touring and logistics experience from going on the road with bands, connecting with all the folks that we've worked with from showing up in Nashville, Chicago, Atlanta, Pine Ridge, Crow Creek for years and years and years from these food drives, utilizing that network of what I call hunger heroes. We pick up the food. We bring it to the hunger heroes. They distribute in the heart of their community because they know it best. And we've built a really beautiful conscious alliance.
Wow. I saw that in 2021, you established your first national distribution center. And I want to share these numbers because off of your website, you've served 10.8 million meals to kids and families in need. And that's thanks to 130 poster artists, 60 food makers as partners, 119 musicians in festivals, and over 200,000 young people who are donating. It is a huge alliance.
It's incredible. And everyone's welcome. And I'll never put a ceiling on what's possible for us. Like, there's a way to plug in for everybody, and it's a beautiful thing.
So you said that if you could do it over again, you might not do it.
I don't know that. Luckily, I don't have to make that decision, right? Like, here we are, but I don't know. I mean, I think that there,
like on a magnitude of difficulty, how much more difficult was it than you thought it was going to be?
I mean, it's still difficult. It's still beautiful. It's all of it wrapped into one. It's my heart. It's my passion. It's our donor base, not just because they donate to us. Like, everyone leads with their heart here. And so the artists, the musicians, the food makers, the folks that work in the management companies and with these brands, like, these are my friends. These are my families. Like, we celebrate the wins together, right? Like, and we grieve the losses together. Like, I care so deeply about the web that makes up Conscious Alliance that I feel really lucky to be a part of it. And I feel really lucky to have the opportunity for as long as I can and as long as I'm welcome to lead this beautiful organization, and can't be more thankful for the community that I'm able to be a part of and help grow and nurture to make sure that kids and families have access to great food. I think I'd be missing a big part, and luckily I don't have to make that decision again. I think I'd be missing a lot, and I think that there was probably an easier route, not for Conscious Alliance, but for myself, of like, what does that job look like to clock in, clock out, and move on? I mean, it wouldn't work for me. It's not in my DNA and in my even my professional makeup. So I'm sure if I went to go do something else, I'd wind up, all my hobbies turn into side projects, being on boards of different organizations and stuff. So I grasp at, like, what is a hobby anymore, right? It's like, we need to go full tilt if we're going to do something.
Sounds like.
I mean, we have a lean, mean team of 10, and, while we deliver, I think last year we delivered over 12 million in services while keeping our overhead below 7%. Like, it's important to go back to our values of dignity, and to go back to our values of like, this should be fun, and all of those things I think are critical.
Beautiful. Justin, I like to ask all the Inspired Money guests, how do you define success?
I think that I am working on it and will continue to work on celebrating the wins. I have a tendency to move very quickly, and like you mentioned, our national distribution center. I had an architect draw a rendering of a building, a made-up building in a made-up city that had a Denver-ish skyline, and it hung in our boardroom for years. And I would talk about it at every meeting. I would talk about it at every board meeting, and folks would be like, why are we still talking about this? We don't have the money for it. Like, what are you talking about? And in 2021, we opened the doors to a national distribution center directly between Boulder and Denver. So for me, it's about like continually pointing to what we want is how I define success. Like, and then remembering to stop along the way and remembering that we have accomplished those things. And the other big piece of success for me is a thriving team and community. Starting with our internal team, because if we can take care of ourselves first, we can help support others, right? And so success to me is continually striving to create an inspired and healthy workplace, and then a healthy and inspired conscious alliance.
Yeah, we're all in it together.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for sharing your story of being on the receiving end of compassion, and then also leading with compassion and having an impact that goes far beyond the walls of your offices there. Tell the Inspired Money viewers and listeners where they can follow you and learn more.
Well, thank you so much for having me and giving Conscious Alliance the platform to tell our story and engage you listening today. If you go to consciousalliance.org/take action, we have created a beautiful action hub where whether you're on your phone, your tablet, your computer, you can have a positive impact on hunger across America by completing just 3 out of the dozen actions we have there. So, learning about hunger, reading an article, making a donation. For every $1 donated, we're able to provide 2 meals. But the real amazing part of our partnership with Impact Tree is that if you out there go to consciousalliance.org/take action, complete 3 of the actions, which will take you about 2 minutes, you'll get entered to win 2 tickets to any one Red Rocks show in 2023.
Awesome. Red Rocks. I've never been in person. I've only seen it on TV, but it's got to be the most beautiful amphitheater in the United States.
It's incredible. We're lucky to have it just a few miles away from our national distribution center, and we're really lucky to have the support of the promoters, bands, and all the fans out there to keep this thing moving. But I really encourage you to go to consciousalliance.org/take action. And again, you have an opportunity to win some tickets to Red Rocks and the concert of your choice.
Everybody should do that. Thank you, Justin. Appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
So what was your favorite Inspired Money moment? So often, we hear about people who are doing great things who felt predestined to do the work that they do. Other times we hear about the importance of setting clear goals and then working towards those goals. I was touched to hear about Justin's very personal struggles resulting from his cerebral palsy and severe dyslexia. He always had mentors who encouraged him and supported him to do great things. I love how he grew up with no expectations. He was simply grateful for walking and always figuring out what he'd be capable of doing next. My takeaway is to focus on doing what you're passionate about. Don't settle for just one thing. In Conscious Alliance, Justin found the most impact at the intersection of combining great music, hunger relief, and youth empowerment. If you had a different favorite Inspired Money moment, please post a comment or share it in the Inspired Moneymakers Facebook group at inspiredmoney.fm/Facebook. Thank you for tuning in to the end. Be sure to subscribe to my email that goes out every 2 weeks. It's investment focused, and the Runnymede investment team highlights data, news, and events that we think are worth sharing. Subscribe at inspiredmoney.fm/newsletter. Thank you for joining me on this mission. Have an inspired week and do something that scares you, because that's where the magic happens.